Here we go. All right. Hey, guys. Morning. How's everybody doing? Savannah, how you doing?
Doing all right, hanging in there. It's still dark here in Seattle, but other than that, feeling good.
Good. Alex?
Good. Can't complain.
Very excited by the fact that you've got blur background that now exists. It's a new feature on StreamYard. Didn't understand that. But yeah, good.
Well,
yeah, Alex, go.
I was gonna sneak in. I was gonna do your line. Actually, can I be Steph for today for a second? Are you ready? Welcome.
Okay.
Welcome to the Keys of AWS Optimization, the show where we share stories, concepts, and solutions to help you unlock cost optimization at AWS. With me today, I have Steph Gooch, commercial architect for the optics team, myself, and then Jeff Barr with a blonde long wig on. Obviously, Jeff did not grow long blonde hair overnight. Unfortunately, he had a last minute reschedule, but don't worry, he's coming back. We're locking down the date soon, and it shouldn't be more than a month away, and we will let you guys know as soon as that happens. But today, we have Savannah joining, and I believe Savannah's been on today, or on before. But Savannah, just for a refresh, do you want to give a little bit of your background and your role on the optics team?
Yeah, absolutely. You may remember me from the anomaly detection talk earlier in the year, but my name's Savannah Jensen. I am a customer enablement specialist on the optics team. As I mentioned before, I'm out of Seattle. I've been with Amazon for just over 4 years now. Before that, I worked in healthcare tech, but ever since kind of coming over to this side of the house, I've worked on kind of the billing, optimization, customer relationship side, everything to do with that financial health piece of the puzzle.
Nice. Just to jump in, someone said we need blonde Jeff Barr. So thanks Savannah for coming in and thank you. Yeah, appreciate Savannah coming in and saving us. So we've got a fun topic that actually stemmed from a customer conversation I was having, and then in a call yesterday with me and Savannah having a catch up, we thought this is actually quite an interesting subject. Maybe we could do this on Twitch as a new subject. So the idea is we're going to talk about common pitfalls, common mistakes that we've seen customers make that aren't necessarily massive mistakes, but they're things that maybe could incur some costs and trouble down the line. So we've got a whole list of them we're going to get through. Feel free to drop comments, questions in the chat about any of these or anything about customization in general, and we can hopefully help you out. But I'll jump in on the first one. And so this is a common one which I see a lot of my customers doing, and it is not modernizing or having old instance types. So seeing stacks and having those M1s, anytime I see an M1, I'm like, hang on, what is this? And jumping in. Have you seen that much, guys?
I get excited when I see an M1 because I'm like, oh, I love to hear this argument. Like, why is this person swinging this? But a thing to note about that original instance, if you deploy the Kpi dashboard that we've talked about the last couple of weeks, that will tell you if anything is original generation. And honestly, at this point, there's a lot of instance types like the M family and the C family and T that even if you're in that 2 range, maybe it's questionable. Like you really shouldn't be using any C2 or M2. That's going to become kind of the new original generation. But yes, that's an easy, that's actually like one of the first things I look at when I look at customer data is who is using original generation and why.
Yeah, I put the dashboard link in there, and you can check us out on our YouTube channel. So if you're watching us on VOD on our YouTube channel, Keys of Aws Optimization, you can check out the last episode with Aaron, who talked about it. I was going to say, I wonder how long it would take you to mention the Kpi dashboard. What about you, Savannah? Do you see it often with customers?
Yeah, I see usually there are kind of older teams who haven't adopted that cloud framework or cloud mindset really when they're deploying things. So oftentimes when I see something like that with a customer, it's kind of all in a cluster in one business unit or kind of in one section. And M1 obviously is not what we should be using in 2022. Even M3, I start to want to have that conversation, even if it's kind of middling, really that indicates to me that there might be some hesitation there, maybe some misunderstanding. There's an opportunity for some education and to kind of get people more of an appetite for modernizing, for thinking about keeping things fresh and performant and cheaper. So.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
The only thing I think to worry about is people often, it's because there's someone made something and it's stable and they're like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of vibe. But there is something about now, it's been a while since I've worked on EC2, so I'm not going to pretend I remember all this, but there is something about the drivers that are installed on the M1s and M3s that are different from the ones on M5s, so just be aware. But yeah, talking about modernization, Savannah, do you want to give us the next one that you see people do?
Yeah, absolutely. So another one that we do kind of run across every once in a while is not using Graviton with managed services. And it's kind of an interesting thing because if you're taking the time to kind of migrate to a managed service, you definitely want to be getting that benefit of the newest, quickest, most performant AWS instance. So definitely making sure that you're taking advantage of Graviton there, because it's one of the easier places to do it. You don't really have to do any of that re-architecture. It kind of comes out of the box a little bit more easily than if you had to physically migrate your own stuff onto the Graviton instance sometimes.
Yeah, and if you're gonna upgrade anyway, might as well. Yeah, if you're already moving through. I had a conversation with a head of FinOps, one of my customers today, and just looking through their list, and you were like, they want to buy. This is going to be our next one. They want to buy RIs for RDS, but then I was like, oh, before you do that, have you thought about Graviton? And they're like, oh, I mean, we have some Graviton. They were spending like a little tiny amount on Graviton, but I was like, why don't we just do an exercise looking at that first? And if you could move those and then buy RIs, you get the saving of Graviton and the saving of RIs on top of it. Go on,
double
Alex,
trouble.
Yeah.
Well, I actually have a question because like my next one was going to be around storage, but I have a question for you guys. You know, I always think that it's a mistake to not try out intelligent tiering. I know that not a lot of times, but there are times where people will test it out and then kind of put in their own policy, or their own policy works better. Is there a way that you can kind of test out as a customer, and you know, my stuff is following a pretty typical partner or pattern, I don't need intelligent tiering to kind of get rid of that cost, even though the cost, let me preface, of intelligent tiering is very minimal from that standpoint. But do you ever like look at a customer that you're working with and say, hey, I don't know if this is really worth it, like you're following a pretty easy pattern here?
So if I see that they already have a really good storage split amongst different tiers, I usually mention intelligent tiering, but I don't necessarily push it really hard. I try to feel out exactly what it is that they're doing. With intelligent tiering, what I've usually found is even if they have everything pretty locked down and a good setup of lifecycle rules in a certain part of the organization, there might be like a sandbox account, a dev account, something like that, where they're not quite as sure what's in those buckets and not really sure what the patterns are, where intelligent tiering is a good candidate. So even if it's something small, especially now that we've gotten rid of the monitoring fee, or not the monitoring fee, the thing that smaller objects won't move all the way into IA, I would say it's likely has a use case somewhere, even if it doesn't have a use case everywhere. At least that's what I've seen so far.
Nice. Yeah, I think having some kind of policy set up so that you can transition objects. That if you know that, if you're familiar with buckets, if you know your buckets intimately, then you can sort them out. But yeah, I think it's quite a challenge because sometimes people that are, I'm kind of going off what you're saying, but sometimes people, every time I touch something, this light flickers. So if I disappear, I'm just warning you now, I can't touch anything. I'm not going to move. Sometimes people that are looking at the optimization of buckets, they don't know what the setup with them is. And so maybe it's going in and taking a step back. And so kind of going before what you're saying, Alex, and looking at maybe using the Cur or intelligent S3 lens to figure out what those patterns are, and then start to say like, okay, maybe this stuff can go in somewhere regularly and we can move it into Glacier Instant Access, which was released recently, and things like that. But yeah, definitely. Another one sticking on S3 is something I bring up constantly now is multiple uploads and versions. I don't know if you guys think of these. When you think of lifecycle policies, that's what I jump to now, is something that I didn't know before I worked here, was there are two things. So if you don't know, when you have S3, there are two things that could be costing you money that you might not even know that you have. And one of them is your object version. So if you keep updating an object and you have enabled versioning, you might be keeping many of them that you don't need. And so now you can set a policy to delete the ones you don't require. And then there's multi-part upload. So if you're uploading a file, a large file, it gets split into multiple parts and something happens. A good example, I think, is Athena. I don't know if you guys have seen this, where if Athena queries are running and it starts to upload the backend data, then it fails. I think that can cause it. And so that's costing you money and you can't even see the file. So setting up those, I can link in the chat an example of the policy you can set for that.
Steph, though, if I am me and I'm not a policy setter, right? Like I think that's part of where I like draw my technical line. Is there a way that I can like just see in our cost and usage data that might be happening? Or is there like, how can I see that might be happening?
So the best way to see it, go on, Savannah, you go.
It's definitely an S3 lens. I think it might be in Trusted Advisor also. Steph, correct me if I'm wrong on that one.
Oh, I don't know.
But
I'm not actually sure.
S3 storage lens has a bunch of flags that are really critical and kind of aren't seen plainly in other places. So we highly recommend turning that on. It will flag those things pretty overtly when you pop it open.
Yeah, I'll put this blog up once my thing loads. So this is a how-to on 5 ways to reduce costs on using S3 Lens. And this kind of walks you through what to look for, how to make the dashboards in S3 Lens show you the multiple uploads. This is something I constantly use as a resource. So check that one out. It is really, really helpful to have. I don't know if it's a Trust Advisor. I'll have to go back and check.
Yeah, we'll have to double check. I'm like thinking that it might have been, but
yeah, another one that Savannah, you brought up the other day was retrieval costs is something we need to think about, right?
Yeah, this one's a little bit more niche. We don't see it quite as much, but if you are kind of testing out the different S3 tiers and kind of playing around, something that we'll run into sometimes is retrieval costs. So if you use S3 INT, there isn't a retrieval cost from IA because our automation decided that it should go there. But if you put it in there and kind of pull it out under a certain circumstance, there can be a retrieval cost associated with that, similarly to some of the other depot tiers as well. So if you're just doing testing, usually it's not too much of an impact if you're moving something small, but it is something to keep in mind when you are thinking about how you're setting up that S3 kind of configuration and lifecycling policy. What's going to have a retrieval cost, what's not, because you don't want to get a surprise the first time you pull something out from kind of one of the deeper tiers.
Steph, isn't that a great plug to talk about what you released this week? There's some good retrieval talk in your blog post.
Yes, I need to find the link.
No, it's fine. But I will say, kind of while she's finding that, a couple of things, especially what we've started with, are the automatic, right? The like really common cost mistakes. And then a cool thing about this blog post that Steph's about to link to, these are the things that are going to become those, right? Like right now, all teams are still like learning about them, but come mid-year, come at the end of the year, these are the things that we're going to say are included in those common mistakes. Okay, now you've had this information. Why are you still doing something this way, kind of thing? Yeah,
definitely. There's the link to the blog, newly published. Check it out. It's all about reinvent. As you've seen, we talked about reinvent a lot on here. So have a read of that to learn about how to put into practice some of those optimization opportunities. Is there anything else with S3? I wanted to pop back to EC2, but anything else on S3 people wanted to mention? No?
Nope, I think that covers it.
I mean, well, yeah, I think that's it. I might come up with one while
Yeah. We can jump all over the place. It's our show. Yes. We can do what we want. Going back to EC2, were a couple of things around thinking about what usage you're having. So one I thought of the other day was, and this actually comes from some work that John in our team did, who's been on before with an EBS episode, a CloudWatch episode, thinking about using Spot. And we've also had many episodes about Spot as well, but it's thinking that you have to be like, all Spot or nothing, and like your entire workload has to be on Spot, and Spot seems like a really crazy thing. And it kind of links into what we mentioned about RIs or savings plans, is that thinking that is the idea that you can have RIs and savings plans for your static workloads and then Spot for your kind of spikes in your workload. And having that balance between the two is a really good option. and people forget and they think that you have to do all at one. I mean, Alex, you've worked with the Spot team a lot. Has that kind of come up with them before, this mixed hybrid model?
Yeah, I mean, I think hybrid is always best, right? I think that's why with any of these common cost mistakes, usually if you're seeing a trend of only one thing, there's probably a cost mistake somewhere in there, right? Like with the blur, my son's wonderful artwork makes it look like I kind of have a crown on.
It sometimes comes in.
But I mean, I will always say, try things out and have a mixture of things. Don't have necessarily all Graviton. Like, try out different things. Don't want to pigeonhole yourself, but like Spot is actually a really great way to try out those new things, right? Because it's going to be inexpensive. You can do it really well in your sandbox account. You can auto scale with it. So I would have that like hybrid and mixture in it.
Having that auto scale option. Yeah, go on, Savannah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think getting stuck with any one purchasing model with EC2 and trying to make that your entire workload is inherently a flaw. Like, you moved off of on-prem so that you don't have to stick with one thing anymore. Making sure that you are RIing or savings planning those kind of static workloads is obviously going to save you a lot of money. There's likely always going to be some sort of spike or on demand on top of that, fluctuation, and then mix in Spot with wherever it's best applicable. If you're trying to kind of move on to containers, there are definitely other ways to think about compute too. But as everybody's kind of already said, if you've got one thing, if you're going into Cost Explorer and it's all just one chunk, when you look at that purchase model, you're probably leaving some opportunities for savings on the table there.
Yeah, definitely. And you said it before we started, which was I'm going to repeat and steal your thought, which is like, use the cloud what it's for. Take on that flexible model, like you said, Savannah, that this why you moved away from potentially on-prem to have this. Every time this light goes, it freaks me out. You want to take advantage of this flexibility. But going back on the other thing on flexibility is obviously elasticity around turning things off. And I am a big fan of the instant scheduler concept of just turning things off at night when you shouldn't be working, as Alex preaches to us in our team. Stop working in the evening, get off, especially for your dev and test accounts. Like, some applications, okay, I'm generalizing, some applications need to be on 24/7, I'm sure, and I've dealt with them, but a lot of them you could just turn off and be saving that money. You don't leave the TV on all day, as I like to say, if you're not watching it. So use that. Do you guys use it? Have you used the instant scheduler solution much?
I have tested it out. Again, like, when I was working in a big enough environment where we'd use it, I was not the technical expertise to do it. But with that being said, if you're kind of in a hybrid role where, you have some technical influence, but maybe you're not the one building the application, it's really easy to go see the opportunity. It's easy as just like going into Cost Explorer, select EC2, get as granular as you can by time and see if there's up and downs, right? Or and really start with on demand. And if it is completely static, then like there's your first alarm.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah, I will say I see it used a lot for weekends very successfully. Not everybody wants to kind of take the plunge to overnights right away, but weekends are usually a pretty safe bet for those dev, test, sandbox environments if you know that nobody's in there or nobody should be in there because it's the weekend.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the good things about Instant Scheduler is that it allows you the flexibility to set those parameters yourself. You're not adhering to rules that AWS has set or anybody has set. It's kind of in a DynamoDB table that you can do it. I've just popped the link is coming in the chat. So yeah, have a look if you haven't used it. And I think Alex said it's one of those easy ones that you mentioned before. But oh no, my laptop is dying. I'm having absolute chaos on my technical guys. If I disappear, it might happen. I've gone like 25% down on my power. Yeah, exactly. This is all of this lighting, the cameras is taking it out of my poor little Mac. What else is there? So the other one we had, go on. Did you have one?
Yeah, I was going to say on the same vein, the cheapest way to pay for something is to not pay for it because you're not using it. Terminating idle resources. If you have an EC2 box that's just sitting on somewhere, we do have tooling to find that within a couple different places in AWS. Cost Explorer is likely the easiest place to go look, but making sure that you don't have people leaving the faucet running is definitely very important. And similarly, rightsizing, it's in the same report. If you're using something that's wildly overpowered for a small workload and you're really not even coming close to the kind of ability that that instance can give you, maybe it's time to think about spinning that down a little bit, maybe selecting a medium instead of an extra large, and bringing down your costs that way.
I'm gonna detour really quick because as Savannah was explaining that, I came up with a question for Savannah specifically. So Savannah is kind of our guru when it comes to setting up large customers and their account structure and stuff like that. So I know we're talking about a lot of common cost mistakes that we see, and this might not dive into a cost related mistake, but what are common mistakes that you see people do when they're setting up like their account structure or, the payer account structure, or any of that stuff?
Yeah, so there are two that really raise some red flags for me. Number one is putting everything in one linked account or trying to dump as much as you can in one linked account, because that just makes it really hard for you to understand what's going on in there. It's really not the greatest from an organizational perspective. Depending on what you have in there, there can be some security concerns as well. So making sure that you're being thoughtful about how you're structuring those linked accounts, who needs access to each workload, how are you going to think about which workload goes where, how are you going to kind of set that up. And the other one is not naming things in a way that you can track. So this is really common with folks who either kind of started out testing the cloud or have been on the cloud for a while, or folks who have kind of brought a lot of disparate pieces onto one organization. There's usually not a solid naming convention, and that's not always bad. But if you have a linked account that is just spiking and costing you more and more every month, and you don't know how to figure out who owns it and who to go talk to about it, that is a major problem for you. So making sure that you have at least some sort of naming convention is ideal, but even if you don't have a consistent naming convention across the organization, making sure that you at least know who owns what and can go talk to someone is really, really key.
Yeah, definitely. We used to do it in a way, and we recommend this in one of our other labs, the data collector, where you use the organization structure is there for a reason, take advantage of things like OUs and put tags of, I don't always love having people's names against tags. I don't know how you guys, that might be an interesting point to see how you feel, because people leave. We keep mentioning people leaving. Alex, don't worry, we're not going anywhere. We've said this before. But that used to happen all the time, and you'd be like, oh no, I have to go and change someone's name on like who owns resources and things. So I think it was Andy mentioned one of his customers has like a unique ID code tagged on their accounts at the org level, and then a database somewhere else that manages all of that, and kind of taking it away from having to deal with the Amazon organization, but it's like all connected. And then using the optimization lab, you can cut that in the cur and then kind of backtrack it. So there's a lot of ways in which you're doing that. I just want to highlight, Tony just put this comment in, going back to what we were talking about before, things up and down. So we're using Terraform for consistently destroying dev at night and redeploying in the morning. This is really good. Tony, well done. This is something I'm a massive fan of. The reason that you're in the cloud is that you should be able to deal with outages. You should be able to deal with flexibility, things coming up and down. And the fact that you are confident in your applications being able to do this is well done. If you want to come on the show, Tony, and talk about how you're doing this, let me know. Message us. I'll put the email up. Feel free to get in contact with us, costoptimization@amazon.com. Anyway, going back. So any other organizational things? Alex, do you come across any?
I mean, some of it runs into access mistakes, right? Like who should have access to what. And I strongly believe that you should have one account where like the admin work is done, right? If you're looking through the cost and usage data, if you are keeping certain things in S3, I think it just makes it easier that way. But a lot of these things, especially what Savannah mentioned, they're not directly charging you, but they can end up charging you more time, and they can end up with more mistakes because it's not regulated like where everything is going.
Definitely. Yeah. The idea of a cost account, I think we've been calling it in the labs, where you move that workload across somewhere else, is something that we might do as another episode. Is just all deep diving into like what you should have in your payer account, what you should have in your cost account. If anything, it's more secure. One of you guys mentioned that already, is the fact that we don't always want lots of people logging into your master payer account or your management account. So good to kind of steer away. And to go off another thing that Alex, you mentioned, the curve, not having the curve set up, I often think is a bad thing. And that's, I mean, I'm a big fan of it. It's not the worst thing. It's also we're having the curve set up. Like, I don't want to get hate. I don't want to be cancelled because of my obsession with the curve. You can use the Cost Explorer. I've had many customers tell me they use the Cost Explorer API. One of which I know watches the show, so hello if you're watching. And they use it. They might migrate to the Kerr, hopefully. But yeah, using that and then paying for those API calls is something. But it's the flexibility you get with the Kerr, and then the ability to be more granular in your queries, I think, is useful. So and doing it using Parquet Athena format, not a CSV.
Just kind of bringing it down really to the 101 level too, is just not enabling tooling. Cost Explorer is something that you have to go turn on. Most of the folks who've been using AWS for any amount of time have already turned it on. There are different features within Cost Explorer that you also have to turn on. So that rightsizing functionality that detects those underused and idle resources, you do have to go turn on. Anomaly detection, that's a little bit of setup, but it is something that you do have to kind of initialize. If you need budgets, turn those on. If you're looking for the CSV version of the bill, that's another thing that you've got to go turn on. So there are kind of a lot of boxes to check when you're setting up the account. You may not need all of them, but what you don't want to have happen is to come 6 months down the road and realize that you actually really did need one of these things and you didn't set it up initially.
Yeah. The especially things that, like, I forget that you need to turn Cost Explorer on. Is that bad? I think it's just I haven't had to deal with like an initial account where I've had to turn it on in so long that I forget about it as a concept. But yeah, S3 Lens, Compute Optimizer, all those fun things for sure. And setting, don't forget to set up your cost visualization tool, aka Kudos, or other alternatives are available. So we've got a couple more minutes left. Is there any big things we haven't spoken about that you are like, I want to like flag this as something for people to look out for? Alex, do you have any?
No, I mean, I say just like, if you take anything from this conversation, it's number one, if any of these common mistakes are happening, do you know how to track down who's responsible for them? And number two, don't use original generation EC2. Just don't do it.
Just those two. That will sort you out, if anything. There you go.
If you don't see an RI for it on the pricing page, on the AWS pricing page, don't do it. Just don't spin it up.
Yeah. Savannah, what are your last? You could get last two if you want, things that just to make sure people know.
Yeah, I guess we haven't touched on monitoring too much. And this is kind of a small one, but when you are doing monitoring, whether it's with CloudWatch, some other tooling within AWS that leverages CloudWatch, just be thoughtful about what you're getting out of it and how long you need it. So how frequently are you pinging CloudWatch? Because that can definitely add up. If your frequency is set to once a minute, that can get expensive, no matter, depending on what you're pulling. And then with those logs, do you actually need them for the rest of eternity? Likely not. Figure out kind of when they're going to stop being relevant, when you actually do need something like that, and kind of go from there. Be thoughtful about how you're configuring that, basically, is the takeaway.
Yeah, that's a big one. Looking at that frequency page of your CloudWatch logs and being like, oh, I've just never retired them, and it's like this application runs daily, but I need to know what happened 3 years ago. It's not, and you pay for that, so yeah, keep it out. One I'll throw out is one that I always look for is the CloudTrail, where the first one's free, which is nice. We're lovely. We give you the first one free so that you can monitor what's going on in your accounts. And then after that, you pay for every management event that occurs. So not only are you paying for the management events that you're tracking twice, you're also paying for the data stored in S3 twice. So you may need that. There are some other things where maybe if you have an organization view of all of your trails, but you want to have one specifically in your account so you have direct access to them, like that might be needed. But it would be better if you could have a centralized place where everyone can query in a maybe using Athena or in a sorted way. But yeah, that we've got 1 minute left. There was a question: do we have any red flags with above? but on account structure, I think I've lost the question, but it's Tony again. So Tony, feel free to get in contact. Okay, that's all from us. Next week, we are having a demo on the forecasting tool. So check out that. Thanks for joining us and see you all next week. Bye.